Hello everyone, welcome to the CG Cookie live stream. As we were just talking in the chat, I did get a new computer, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But what we're going to be talking about today, the primary project that we're going to be discussing and demonstrating today, is creating this stitched patch. It's kind of a random project that came out of a character that I was working on. That had a big patch on the back, and I was trying to figure out a way to make that look very accurate, highly detailed, while not, having to hand paint all the textures. And so I came up with this little workflow. It's pretty fun. I'm not sure how applicable it's going to be, especially if you're not doing character work with patches specifically, but it's a fun project. We learned a couple things along the way. So I thought it'd be a fun one to stream. Yes, please give me a thumbs up. Well, I see Miranda. It seems that everything's fine, audio and stuff, which is surprising because I did get a new computer. I finally built one. You guys know that I've complained a little bit about my former computer, which was a 2013 Mac Pro. It served me very well, but has started showing some age in recent years. And especially since I got serious about streaming, it struggled a bit, especially with EV things. But yeah, so I am running Linux now. I'm the Linux guy at CG Cookie, which I'm not sure how I feel about that. I want to be proud about it, and I think I've got Linux set up and working to be my daily driver. Gotten past a lot of the initial quirks, but I've got the stream set up. It seems to be working fine. The best part of it is that in testing Blender with this new hardware. A kitchen render, like ArcViz render that took an hour on the old computer, takes 20 minutes on the CPU, on this new CPU, and 15 minutes on the GPU, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, it's Pop! OS Linux. It's an Ubuntu fork, I guess, and 32 gigabytes of RAM. The processor is AMD Ryzen Threadripper 2950X. The graphics is GeForce RTX 280. And yeah, so those are the main specs, and Blender is running super well. And it looks like my stream is at the full 30 frames per second, so I think everything's looking good. Oh, right, yes, the question tag, thank you, Silent, for reminding us that I can see that question pop up by whenever you type in Q in the brackets. And did I miss any questions? Somebody watched Blender today. Yeah, I did. Yeah, so the Pop! OS thing, I was looking into System 76, I believe is what it's called, to possibly get one of their pre-built machines. And then I stumbled onto Pop! OS and then saw that Pablo was also using Pop! OS. So I'm like, hey, that's got to be a good one, at least to start with. From Prana Visud, with 2.8, how obsolete will the 2.7 tutorials be? Our plan is as soon as 2.8 is released, we're going to do our best to release all of our fundamentals courses. Maybe not all of them, but like we've got 6 planned fundamentals courses to be remade and re-released with 2.8. So your core modeling, lighting, rendering's maybe not going to be on there, but shading and awesome, thank you. My throat's a little sore. My wife just brought me some tea, so she's a sweet one. And yeah, so we're going to redo all our fundamentals courses with 2.8. As far as the other 2.79 courses, like the concepts are not obsolete with each new version. So, buttons might be in different places. The UI will obviously look different, but if you want to learn from them, you'll be able to. If you need to have your hand held every step along the way, if a button placement completely messes up your learning, like I understand, especially for beginners, that's going to be hard. But like if you've got a little bit of Blender experience and you're determined, like you're going to still be able to learn from the 2.79. But understand that we are 2.8 from here on out. I've used it for all my streams in the last few months. All the recent courses have been 2.8. So we've switched over to 2.8, and everything going forward will be that. Yeah, Omar, you mentioned that there's a new perspective on the camera. My new monitor, because the Mac monitor does not work with this hardware, had to get a new monitor and needed to move the camera. So anyway, yeah, so that's a new computer. Hopefully it all works. This is the first stream. Hopefully nothing breaks or goes wonky. But yeah, it's fun having some new hardware, up-to-date hardware. In other Blender news, the mini code quest starts next week, which is exciting. That should be, as far as I understand, the last big serious push for 2.8 to get to a release stage. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed for it to result in the release candidate. That would be great. As soon as the release candidate lands, we are going to go hardcore at re-recording all of the fundamentals courses. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting week. I think updates coming from the Blender Foundation, Blender Institute, I forget what it's called now, but the coming from the Blender front will be exciting this next week. Pablo's Blender Today, it's already been mentioned that I watched that. I recommend you watch it too if you want to keep up to date with what's going on with Blender development. His stream did move from the Blender.today YouTube channel. It's now on the official Blender YouTube channel. So yeah, check that out. Just if you weren't aware of that it's moved. Pretty cool. He's grown an audience and now is moving that onto the bigger subscriber base. Pretty cool. Awesome. Wes is in here. Good to see him as always. Some small 2.8. I mean, a couple highlights that I got from his stream from yesterday is that when you mute nodes in Blender 2.8 in the latest version, they kind of go dark. The whole node goes dark, so it's a little more obvious when you're muting a node, which is great. So I think I'm in the node editor all the time. That'll be certainly useful to me. The EV now supports object UVs, meaning you can project UVs from one object to another. It wasn't able to do that before, so slowly but surely it's becoming fully featured, and that's one that I've definitely used before. Awesome. So I did see it mentioned that there's a bunch of people in here. Just remember the question tag if you have one. If you have a question, feel free to ask it at any point. Just the tag makes it easier for me to find in this chat. Like this, for example, from Omar. How come we can see the other side of your curtains now? So I did have to move my web camera to my other monitor. It used to be over here, but I mean, it covers a part of my screen if I put it on the other monitor. So hopefully that's not a deal breaker and you don't bail on the stream. All right, I don't think I see any other ones. So great. Also, big news. On Thursday, the new Blender Open Movie premieres. This is spring. This is the latest and greatest from the Blender Animation Studio. If you've been following that at all, it's a big day. It's a big day on Thursday, so I'm really looking forward to that. They keep upping the visual quality with every one of their shorts, and it looks like an intriguing concept. These massive creatures, monsters, little girl, I don't know. It's intriguing. I love the visuals that I've seen so far, so that should be a lot of fun on Thursday. Keep an eye out for that. And yes, there will be a trivia quiz at the end of the stream, so get ready to nerd out for that. And yeah, about that actual project, that is the whole reason we're probably here, that stitched patch. Let's get started in that. I'll jump over to Blender. We're going to start from a fresh scene. And just make sure I'm not missing any questions before we start. CG Cookie coming on Discord. There is an unofficial CG Cookie Discord community. I'm sure someone in here has that information. Yeah, there is a CG Cookie on a fourth. That's exactly what I said. Jake's on it. Thank you, Jake. All right. All right, let's get started. So first, I will open up some reference, I suppose, since this will be a lot of shading and lighting kind of in theme. That's what the project is about. A little bit of modeling at the beginning, but I'm going to open up a new panel down here. We're going to change that to the 3D view. That's going to be our render viewport. Turn off overlays, and then I'll open up another one, which will be our reference image. Always use reference when you're going for anything really, but certainly realism. So I will open up, let's see, patches ref collage, and then maximize that. So yeah, what we're creating is a clothing patch that fairly common. You might see them, especially I feel like on like people's backpacks and stuff. Like in high school, they had patches or band logos and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we're creating. And I've got a few examples here found on CC Search, Creative Commons Search. And what I want to take note of is how I'm going to construct the patch. There's going to be two parts to the patch. There's going to be what I'm referring to as patch faces, which is like the flat panels So like the red, the majority of this red symbol, in this Ghostbusters example, the ghost, like the white part, and then you've got the borders, which outline the faces. So there's going to be two modeling components in the project. A question from Jan William. Still haven't answered the most important question. You will animate this being stitched on, right? If I have time at the end, I will show you not how to animate it, but like how to take a flat patch and then conform it to the surface of, be it your character's jacket or something else. Like I'll show you, if I have time at the end, I'll show you how to do that. It's not that complex. But no animation. Not gonna attach this to a jacket and then cloth sim it with animation. That's out of the scope. So yeah, with that in mind, as far as the model construction, we will get started, and it's going to be pretty simple modeling. Honestly, I'll get rid of everything in the scene and go to the front view. I need to grab my reference. So since we are using, hold on a second. Cool. All right, so since we are using the CG cookie patch as reference, I'm going to grab that logo image. Project, stitch patch, source, ref, there it is. I'm just going to drag it into Blender. Awesome, so it comes in as a reference image. Let's Alt-G to zero out the translation, maybe move it above the ground plane. That's how I always like to work. Above, treat this plane as treat the grid as the ground plane. Then I'll move it back in space, so it is especially viewable in the front orthographic, but not really, as I zoom around in 3D, it'll be less obvious. Question: will there be a VOD for future reference? It's getting late for me and I can't be on. Yeah, we record all of our live streams, and so you'll be able to. I'm pretty good about getting them uploaded within 24 hours of broadcast. So by tomorrow, if you check in, it should be up. Yeah, I know some people are in here. I saw someone was in here at like 2 a.m. their time. Pretty crazy, pretty dedicated. I really appreciate you being here. But if you have to bail, I understand, and you can see the VOD, the video on demand, tomorrow, archive version. All right. So we've got the reference in here. I'm going to start by trying to organize my scene early on. That's part of the default collection, and I'm going to rename this collection ref. Also rename the object cookie logo ref. All right, this way I can hide it, or if I need any other reference, I can hide it or turn it off for selectability, which I don't want to be able to select it, so I'll just turn that off. And now I can, well, actually before I do that, I do want to change the opacity. So with my image plane selected, is it selected? Oh, it's turned off. So with it selected, I'll go to my reference plane properties and use alpha. Let's take the transparency down to like 0.28. I don't need it to be too opaque. Making sure I don't have any questions. All right, so now we will add I'm just going to add a mesh plane, typically how I like to start. I really just want the vertices, so I'm going to select a vertex, Shift-D to duplicate it. Wait a minute, no, that's not how I wanted to start. Sorry, I rehearsed earlier and I found a quicker method. So I'm going to actually select all of the vertices and remove them, and instead add, I'm in edit mode, by the way. You could do this in object mode, but I'm just going to do it in edit mode. I'm going to add a circle. Let's open up the properties, and I'm going to choose 48 verts for the diameter, the circumference diameter, I think. So you can see how that increases the amount of verts, and then I'm going to rotate in X 90 degrees. Now I can scale this up and move into position. So what I'm creating here is the face portion of the patch, the broad flat areas that kind of outline the most detail and then establish the majority of the design. And then we're going to add border objects soon. All right, so I'm going to delete this, and then I'm just going to manually extrude some verts around these details, the bite out of the cookie. Oops. All right, so you can, I think it's gonna be easier if I just control right click. I do use left click select, which is the new default in Blender 2.8. But if you like right click select, I think you would do control left click at first. Okay. And let me remember how I did this. I believe what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything and fill it. All right, so at this point we have the basic shape of the patch. Let's go to wireframe. We have the essential shape of the patch, but I already mentioned that this patch will likely be conformed to a shape, an underlying shape, be it a jacket or a backpack, whatever you put a patch on. And a question real quick from Miranda, is there a way to just convert a clear image like that to a mesh? I don't believe so, not that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe there's an add-on that could do that, but I've never seen people do that before. That would be convenient, especially for this situation, but to my knowledge, that's not possible. It's not. I don't think it's possible with Blender's default tools. But what I'm trying to do here is I've filled the object, all of the vertices, with one massive ingon, but I want there to be an actual grid pattern because you need that extra geometry to conform and deform the patch along with whatever you would put it on. So if you were going to leave the patch perfectly flat, this would be fine. But if you want to conform it, you'll need more geometry. So instead of manually kind of retopologizing, so to speak, in a flat, creating all of the grid by hand, I want to do it as quick as possible, as procedural as possible. So in order to do this, I'm going to, let's see, there's a couple ways to do this. I'm going to go first the more polished way. So I'm going to hit I to inset our face. What this is going to do is give me an opportunity to use the K knife tool and cut some holding edges on the corners. If I undo that and hit Control 2 in object mode, this adds a subdivision surface modifier, which smooths out the corners and it no longer matches the shape. So I need to add holding edges so that it maintains the sharpness of the corner. So tabbing back into, Control 0 in object mode, back to edit mode, and I'm going to use the K tool to cut some holding corners. Let me do this real quick. Kind of boring and monotonous, but there we go. Pretty much done. And then I'm going to delete the edge in between. Keep it all quads. Control X, and then make sure I do not dissolve the vertices. There we go. All right, now in object mode, when I hit Control 2 and add a subsurf modifier, the corners are maintained. All right, so what I'm trying to do, follow with me through these steps. I'm going to apply the subdivision surface modifier. Let's take a look at that in 3D view. All right, now with that applied, it's very smooth, which is what I want. I'm really just wanting it to be smooth for the outside border. All right, now with everything selected in edit mode, I'm going to E and push backwards. All right, so now I've got a thickness to the patch. And the reason I'm doing the thickness is I'm going to use the remesh modifier. And the remesh modifier is going to give us a nice grid in the middle, not this fan triangulated stuff in the middle. All right, this is very ugly geometry. So I want nicer geometry and I need thickness or else the remesh modifier will not work. So now that I've extruded that, let's add the remesh modifier. And the default, you can see there's a much cleaner grid whenever we do that. Now I can play with the settings like the octree depth if you want it a little bit more dense. I think that looks pretty good. It maintains the edge very well. Yeah, I think that's going to be pretty good. We can mess with the scale perhaps. I'm really just trying to pay attention to the edge, make sure that that's nice and clean. All right, I think that's good. So we will apply that, and then we don't really want the thickness in the end. So I will go to side view, and let's delete those vertices. Let's see, the other ones. Control I, delete those verts. All right, so now we've got a quick and dirty retopologized version with a nice grid. This will be great for deforming the patch to any shape we want. And I should do maybe a little bit of cleanup. I wonder. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of a perfectionist a little bit, so might want to go around here and just try and clean up. I'm hitting, so what I'm doing, since I did the, what is it, Alt-M merge at center, I can do that once and then select the verts I want, the next verts I want to merge, and hit Shift-R to repeat that command. Again, I'm not really sure how necessary this is, but it does help with my perfectionism. Alt-M at center. So anytime you do Control-Z to undo something, you will have to refresh the repeat command operation. Control-X to dissolve. Make sure that this is even. The verts are evenly spaced. All right, I think that's going to be fine. Make sure I'm not missing any questions. Take a peek. All right, doesn't look like it. Excellent. All right, so we've got this face version of our patch, the main patch, just the orange part. And at this point, I do, again, need to repeat the inset operation. So inset all of the faces, and then I can go in and reinforce the corners. Now, before I did this earlier, you saw that I was kind of contemplating if I should do this. Based on my research or my rehearsal earlier, let me remove doubles. So my rehearsal earlier, when I did the smooth, the subsurf modifier, I feel like that did a better version with the remesh. That worked with the remesh a little bit better. Whereas if I didn't harden those corners, the remesh didn't behave. That's why I'm doing it again. I did it twice. Once for the smooth, and then once for the remesh rather, and then now I'm doing it for the subsurf modifier. All right. Dissolve those middle edges, and then, yeah, so now we should be able to smooth it very clean, and we've got the extra geometry that we need. Awesome. So this is how I'm going to create all of the patches, very, very similarly. Now, I think that could be a little bit boring to watch over and over, so press 1 in the chat if you'd like me to go ahead and skip forward to where I have all of the faces created, or if you'd like to press 2, I guess, if you'd rather see me. Well, maybe I should just ask for the 1. If I get a bunch of 1s, then I know, okay, we can skip. But yeah, press 1 if you want me to skip forward. Press 2 if you want me to continue modeling piece by piece. I will let the people speak. While I'm waiting, guess I'll start the next one. All right, cool, yeah. Seeing some 1s. I think that's probably a best use of everyone's time. Agreed, awesome. So I'm going to skip forward then. Here we go. Now we've got all versions of our patches created. Perfect. And if I look in the side view, you'll notice that each patch I've offset slightly, because you can't leave them in exactly the same Y coordinate, Y location, because it's going to have Z fighting. So I just barely lifted off each subsequent patch, just slightly off from the surface of the other one. You can see that right there. All right, so that's how I'm avoiding Z fighting. And now when we add the border, it should tie everything nicely together, and you won't even notice that there's offset. Chat delay is pretty intense. I am going to, you're right, it is. I just ordered a long Ethernet cable, so I'm going to have a wired connection very soon for the next stream. So I'm hoping that kind of helps with the delay. But thank you for the 1s. I appreciate the votes. All right, so let's get started with the border portion of the modeling. This is going to be done with curves, and it's actually a lot of fun in my opinion. So I'm going to add a curve, Bezier curve. And before I get into the Beziers, let me actually organize the scene a little bit better. So we've got that ref, we've got patches here. So let me, I did organize them, by the way. We've got patch black, patch orange, and patch white. Okay, so all the pieces that belong to that color, that's how I organized the objects. I'm going to select those objects, hit M to move to a new collection. I'm going to name this patch faces. Awesome. And then for the Bezier curve, hit M and move it to a new collection called patch borders. All right. So this Bezier curve, I'm going. So when it's created, it's got a bit of a curvature, but in the top-down view. So I'm going to rotate in edit mode in X 90 degrees. So now we've got the curvature in the Y-axis. And from here, I can start to create a Bezier version of the outline. All right, so I think the beauty of Beziers is the ability to get a lot of smooth curvature with very few pieces, very few points. So I think we'll start that way. Add another point. Same thing with vertices and meshes. Control right-clicking. Since I use left-click select. Control right-click will extrude another point. And let's see. Starting to create my outline. Very easy around the larger curve, but it might get a little bit trickier here in the bite portion. All right, so the way I'm going to do this is, let's see. I think I can make this a vector curve. So whenever you're in Bezier edit mode, if you hit the V hotkey, you can set the handle type. I think the default is aligned, which is what we see here, where we have these this handle that's behaving this way. But if I hit V and change to vector, now each handle moves individually. So I think I should be able to, what it's very good for is tight corners like this. So I'm thinking maybe I can control click on all of these points and then move these curves. I might hide the ref. It might be a little bit harder to see with that. All right, so it does need to be a cyclical curve. Right now it's broken and I want to make it cyclical. So just right click, bring up the curve context menu and toggle cyclic, which is the Alt-C hotkey. There we go. Now I need to make this one, hit the V key, vector, make it a vector handle type. There we go. All right, so we've got the outline established. It's looking pretty good. Now I need to create a bevel profile for this for the curve. So back to object mode, I'll hit Shift A, curve, another Bezier. I like the Beziers personally. You could probably also work with NURBS, but I'm going to go with Bezier. So I created the object and it disappeared. This is something that Ethan Snell brought up in his latest EV course, the cool things about collections. So my ref collection is active. And so when I created that object, it went into the ref collection, which is confusing. That might get confusing to you. It's like, where did the object go that I just created? And that one's hidden especially. So that's what makes it pretty weird. So I need to move this out to the scene collection, and then maybe I'll click scene collection to make that active, and I don't run into that issue again. Don't love the way that behaves. Yes, Jen Willem, I am creating the curve now, the border, that's the black thread that kind of borders the patch. And so I've got this other Bezier curve. I suppose I can move that into patch borders collection. And then I'll jump into I'll hit 7 on my number pad to go into the top orthographic view. And I'm going to create a roundover, which represents the kind of rounded profile of the border. I can toggle cyclic and then maybe scale just the bottom part of the handles. Use individual origins, scale those to make it a little bit more flat. There we go. So that's the profile. I think I don't want to see the, I don't really need to see the normals, those little arrows. They're just not particularly helpful. They're more distracting in this project. All right, so this is going to be the profile that will extrude along the border of our patch. All right, so let's select our border curve. With patch faces, I suppose I can turn the selection off. And now I know I'll select the patch border itself. Go to the curve menu, curve properties rather, and geometry. Under bevel is where we can choose that new curve. All right, so now we can see the profile. I can scale down the profile object and it will scale down appropriately in the profile of our border. It looks pretty good. That looks like a good size. However, the profile gets really wonky with the vector handles. What if I try right click and switch direction? What about recalculate normals? Interesting, recalculate normals made those aligned vector handle types. That's interesting. I didn't know it did that. All right, so I think vector handles are not actually going to work in this situation. That's okay. That's okay. We can fix it. So what I will do is go ahead and recalculate the normals. And I think I need to rotate the bevel. So I'm going to rotate the bevel object. I'll tab into a couple questions. Hold on a second. Question, would this great suggestion work by Christina? In this case, I would select the outer loop and convert it to a curve. Yeah, no, that's a valid approach. So if I take I'll just do what you're talking about, Christina. I believe in one of the rehearsal sessions I used this approach. So in the mesh, if I just Shift D to duplicate and let's P to make it to separate by selection. Now I've got this object by itself. I can go to Object, Convert to Curve. All right, so now I tab in here, and this is a curve object. That is fine, I guess. Set curve, toggle cyclic. Why is there this break? What is this? Huh, interesting. Yeah, I guess this does work. Let's see. Let me, why didn't I stick with this approach? I know I tested it, but I didn't stick with it for some reason. All right, so I've added the bevel object, and it doesn't appear to be. Why is that not? Oh, it's the taper. I'm sorry. Bevel. Jeez. Yeah. Why didn't I stick with that method? That's a brilliant approach. Unless I'm forgetting something. So I need to rotate this for both of them. Let's change from individual origins to median point. Let's go 90 degrees. Is that what I want? Yeah, that's what I want. Flat. The flat side is on the back, and the curved side is on the front. Yeah, why did I think that's fine. So potentially, I think that's fine. So when we get to the texturing portion, it does matter how many vertices are in the curve, and because it'll change the way the texture is applied. So that's the only, I wonder if that's why I didn't stick with it, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be fine. But I know I tested this method, but I didn't stick with it, and I don't know, I can't remember why. So yeah, that is a good suggestion from Christina. I am still confused between normal curve and Bezier curve. So with a well, a normal curve I think is technically called a NURBS maybe. I don't know. There's Bezier. There's whatever the circle is. I don't know if that's a NURBS circle. Oh, it's a Bezier circle. Okay. Nuts. That was created in the patch faces. That's really annoying, actually. So there's Beziers, NURBS, and then paths. Let's see. What is the? I'm not really sure what a. With NURBS, I don't think you get the handles, right? So like with Beziers, you get these handles to manipulate how the curve functions, but with a NURBS, where is that? Yeah, you don't get the handles. So that's the difference. It just sort of smooths and interpolates between the points, very much like a subdivision surface modifier in mesh polygons. So that's the big difference. That's why, I guess that's why I like to use Beziers, is I like the handles. But let's roll with this. I think that this conversion will be fine. I think it'll be fine. Alt G to move back to the center, and then let's just do the same kind of thing. Oh, so in this version, I did not use the remesh modifier, and I by hand created the topology. Sort of an unnecessary step, I suppose. Remesh is much quicker. I'm going to duplicate the border, P by selection, separate by selection, and convert to curve. Let's move this to the patch borders. Let's see. What happened? Okay, so I need to start renaming this. This is my my bevel object, and then the patch orange is my orange outline. Just call this outline 1. All right, so where is that? Outline 1. Okay, so this is the converted one. Sorry, I think I lost my other one. Patch faces. Yeah, what happened to the first curve I was working on? Patch white goes into patch border. Anyway, I don't know. I feel like I lost the original curve that I was working on. I can oh well, I guess that's fine. Name this outline 002. Outline 02 or outline 01, I need to apply the bevel object. All right, that looks good. Yeah, this is a very, I think it's a very clean solution. I'm fingers crossed that we won't get any texture issues. We shouldn't. All right, so we'll just continue that, converting these shapes. Shift D to duplicate. And convert to, I could do all of them at once, I suppose. Yeah, Miranda, you think I deleted it? I don't remember deleting it, but maybe I must have. You can find your way in the outliner. I believe in you. Yeah, I see people talk about the outliner in 2.8 like it's so much easier to navigate with collections. I don't know. I haven't experienced it being that much easier, and I get lost in it somewhat quickly. Oh well, maybe that's just me. And yeah, I guess I can try and do all of these at once rather than doing individual curve conversions. Let me try and do all of them. I'll just select all the borders. And let's at least do part by part, I guess. Duplicate, P, selection. And it's kind of annoying that whenever they're right over top of each other, you don't see the selected one. Object convert to curve. Now let's select the bevel object. Sweet. Might need to change this one so that it's not penetrating itself and we lose the teeth color. but that is looking good. Maybe combine it with this one, Control J. And so I'll need to edit. Oh, that's a problem. This might be super annoying to edit. Maybe not. If I can use proportional editing, it won't be bad. And I can, so that's fine. So what I'm trying to do, if I look at, yeah, I just want to make a little bit of space. Oh, weird. So since those are not connected, wonder why that is. This must be a NURBS curve. So what if I convert it? Can I, if I tab into edit mode, can I convert this set spline type to Bezier? Okay, now it's connected. But are they vectors? I don't know. That's weird. I feel like with the conversion process, I do lose the ability to manipulate these by hand. It gets a little bit convoluted. Let me undo. I'll just stick with NURBS. That'll be fine. Yeah, like with Beziers, it's a lot cleaner to edit this stuff. Maybe that's why. Anyway, Bezier is a little bit more tedious, but you do maintain easier control of this. But you know, for this project, it'll be fine to just continue converting, I think. Yeah, I do like the grouping. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on why. Something about the outliner. I don't know. They've also talked about that they're going to focus a lot on the outliner in the sprint next week. So I don't know. Maybe people are experiencing frustrations with it. Apparently they are. Just sculpt it, Kent. I do like to sculpt a lot, huh? Yeah. I'm gonna try and figure out a way to sculpt if I can possibly. That's pretty funny. All right, so I'm gonna convert these last bits. Shift D, and this should complete our borders. Object convert to curve, and now we can select our border object. All right, it got a little bit funky on us. Switch direction. How about recalculate normals? Uh-oh. So this one's fine, this one is not. Let's separate that one by itself and figure out what's going on. Okay, I toggled cyclic. Why is that happening? Well, maybe it doesn't need to be cyclic, actually. Maybe I don't need this outer portion. Let's just remove this. Yeah, it should be fine. Oh, no, that's fine up there. Oh, so it is the wrong direction. Switch direction. Okay, switch direction is sort of like flipping normals in mesh mode, or mesh edit. There we go. I can do the same thing over here. Oh, and toggle there we go. Excellent. All right, so we've got our borders established. Now we can start to create the shader. A small gap in the stitching might not hurt. Yeah, absolutely. It's probably the delay, but I think your head's in the same place as me as far as how to fix that. Question. JW suggested using sculpt tools to edit the shape. Oh, that's what you're talking about. Oh, I thought you were, since I like to sculpt so much, I thought you were saying like, figure out a way to sculpt it that'll make it easier. Can you do that? No, I don't think you can. It doesn't give me sculpt mode for beziers. That's only for mesh objects, I suppose. Let me save this before it, in case it crashes on me. This is the recorded version. 01. All right. Now we can actually start what I think is the more fun part, and that's creating the shaders for this. So I'm going to, I'll again pull out my panel since I loaded a different file. Have to do this again. 3D, turn off overlays, and then I'll also need to look at my reference again. So let's switch that to the image editor. Open my collage. All right. Wow, it's got weird, it's got messed up. Okay, so now we're going to be rendering in this view, which I will be using cycles primarily because, well, you'll see, the bump maps don't work well with Eevee. So switch over to cycles, enable render view, and I'm going to add a world, not a material, a world, use nodes, environment texture, and let's open an HDRI. And which one? Oh, I didn't know you couldn't sculpt Bezier curves. I thought with all the control points it might be easier to sculpt. Yeah, it kind of surprised me too that they didn't offer that, because it does with the, whenever you convert to, I guess, NURBS curves, it does feel very similar to mesh edit. So yeah, I kind of expected it to have a sculpt mode compatibility as well. I think this one's going to look fine for rendering. Which one is it? Let's see. Sorry, I just opened it and didn't really talk about why. Yeah, so it's kind of an overcast day in the forest, so it should have some breakup in the reflections. I don't know. I don't think you can really go too wrong with an HDRI selection here, but I know that this one works. These are all from HDRI Haven. And I do not want to see it in the background. It just is kind of a weird context of patch floating in the air in the woods. So I'm going to turn the transparency on in my render settings under film transparency. All right. Now my big window can be switched to the shader editor. We're dropping the ball. We're supposed to be keeping him. You've trained me to save. I think that's what the reality is I'm getting better about saving, I hope. Let's create a new material. Make sure that my patch border, oh, I think they've still been created in this other. Yeah, I've not been naming stuff very well. Before I get to the shader, let's just make sure I want to keep things organized because I do have several pieces where I'm working with. All right, so we've got this, this, and this. All need to go to patch borders. All right, excellent. And all right, great. So now I can select them for sure up here. They're not named properly, so outline 003, outline 004. Although I guess I could just combine them. Why not? Control J to join them. All right, now we've just got outlines. Save my file and go back to the shader editor now that I've got stuff organized a little bit better. So with my outlines selected, create a new material. I'll call this threads underscore border. Okay. You can decimate the Bezier curve via the curve menu in edit mode. You can, oh, now that's interesting. So let's see, curve, the curve menu, decimate. Yeah, decimate curve. Look at that. That's pretty cool. I did not know that. That might come in handy very soon, actually. So thank you for that tip. Yeah, that's going to be a helpful tip. Let's go back to the shader editor, and I'll show you why. Because what we're going to do for the texture is use a voronoi texture. When in doubt, it's going to be voronoi, right? I use this thing all the time, but it's going to be great for the stitches. So Control T, using the Node Wrangler with that add-on enabled, Node Wrangler, it adds texture coordinate and a mapping node. Now, I want to use UVs in this situation, but by default, the curve does not have UVs set. So with the curve selected in the curve properties, in texture space, I need to enable use UV for mapping. All right, now it's going to add that texture all along the border. Let's change the scale to like 100. And what I basically want the opposite behavior. Right now, the texture is being stretched along the curve. I want it to be stretched perpendicularly to the curve. So I need to figure out the scaling. I can do this with the scaling operation. So if I scale in X, okay, that's going the wrong way. Oh, if I go up, notice that the pattern's squishing. But if I go, let's say, down in Y, it starts scaling and stretching along. There we go. All right, so something like this really starts to look like stitches right away. But you can see that I think the density of the curve does affect how tightly packed this pattern is. So this is where the decimate curve option comes in handy. Let me go back to the 3D view. And let's see, I'm going to start with this curve. Let's decimate it. Why is that not decimating? Does it need to be a separate object? Does anybody know why that's not decimating? Bezier. Okay, so when it's a Bezier curve, that's interesting. But you can, let's see, you can sort of see that at the bottom, there's a lot more points than the sides, and that is reflected in the pattern of the stitching. All right, so the density of the points does affect that pattern. But I mean, it's much more consistent like this, so maybe I just need to increase the resolution on the outside. Yeah, I think that's all I need to do. So over here, you can see that everything's pretty dense except for the outermost radius. So let me just increase the density of these. Right click and subdivide. That should be what I need. All right, that's pretty good. Did that even change anything? Yes, it definitely did. Okay. Oh, so Dragon Ice, it's not Bezier. So I guess the decimate only works on Bezier curves. That's good to know. I definitely need to decrease this one. Let's join these back up. Yeah, but this portion right here, can I dissolve these points? Let me convert to Bezier. Set spline type Bezier and then decimate. So maybe that actually doesn't matter in that situation. I didn't see the threads stitch pattern change much. So if I recall correctly, when I rehearsed this, I had to separate these out because I think the issue is the length of the overall curve. Like these particular segments are very small compared to everything else. So it needs to be separated in a different material with a different scale value. So threads border, let's call this threads border A, and then I'm going to duplicate the material, threads border B. Threads border B. All right, and then in the shader view, if I just change the scale value of the voronoi to like by half, 50, maybe even less, like 20. All right, now it looks like a more proper thread resolution. Okay, great. So we've got that established. Let's plug that in as a bump map. My goodness, I forgot my T. All right, let's add a vector bump node. Plug this in as the height, and then into the normal value. Excellent. All right, so now, wait a minute. Oh, that's just on the border. Oh. So since I've created two materials, kind of silly, I need to, no, that'll be fine. That'll be fine. It would be ideal if I established all of the material settings and then duplicated the material and changed the voronoi value. I should have done that after the fact. It's all right. Instead, I'm going to change this to a black color. And the strength, I don't think needs to be up to 1. How about 0.5? You can see how that does start to look like threads already, which is pretty cool. I want it to be metallic. Let's say 0.5 metallic. A little bit more. And then also anisotropic, because that's kind of how threads look. Awesome. That does look like a thread already. All right, I'm going to copy this BSDF, go to my other border texture, border shader. Control V, and also add vector bump, 0.5 value. Oh, it's a viewer node. Awesome. Very nice. I think it's pretty convincing as a thread border. Sweet, pretty simple too. Oh, press 1 if you agree. So how are we going to call this new computer? If the other was a Vader Mac, this is Linux Luke. Linux Luke. I'm down. I like that. I like that. Let's see. Linux Luke. I like it. I like it. Wow, so quickly we got a name for this thing. I'm down. I 1 for me. I'll press 1. Awesome. So great. That's the thread border. Now we can move on to the thread material for the faces, which if we zoom in, let's take a look and consider. I didn't really explain the thread border, but hopefully that was a little bit obvious. You know, like if we zoom in here on the borders themselves, it's just a crosshatch kind of pattern, you know, what we've already created. But it's a little more complex when it comes to these stitch faces, because I'm going to recreate this in a two component method. The first component is going to be like a brick pattern. We're going to use the brick texture, and if we look in here, you can see that there's sort of a brick pattern. It's going to be an modified brick pattern, but it's going to start that way, and we'll be able to create this kind of blocked out pattern row by row. Okay, so if we zoom in, we can see that happening. But then we've also got a little bit of randomness that we will achieve with a, you guessed it, voronoi secondary component. So that's how we're going to approach this. I'm going to select the orange face and create a new material. Call it threads face orange. All right. And we are going to add a texture, brick texture first. This is going to be a bit more of a complex material, so I'm leaving a bit more space. And then Control T for a mapping coordinate and the brick texture. Let's take a look at that by itself. Now I'm going to use the object coordinates, which, well, it goes black. What if I use a voronoi? Yeah, so I want the object coordinates, but maybe I need to rotate the brick texture. Oh, okay, so yeah, rotate it 90 degrees in Y, and there we can see our brick texture applied evenly across the surface. Now it is going to be very small, and I'm actually going to squash the pattern a bit more. All right, so it's not, it already becomes a kind of non-brick sort of pattern, but it does start to emulate a bit more what we see in the reference image. I don't think I need the offset colors quite as much. Maybe something like this. Okay, but I do need to adjust the UVs and modify them a little bit. So I'm going to add a texture, noise texture, and then a color mix RGB. All right, so we're taking the vector data from the mapping node, and we're going to mix it with a texture that's going to alternate. It's going to wonkify our brick pattern, okay? Now, I don't want it to be that strong. How about 0.1? Now, that's maybe not strong enough. How about we change the scale to be like 10? Detail to be 10 as well. All right, so all I'm trying to do here is just, the threads are not perfectly patterned like brick, so I want to offset that a little bit. Maybe the scale pattern's a little bit broad as well. How about like 3 or 2? That's actually a little bit too broad. You know, I'm trying to match the scale here. Okay, that actually, maybe 5 was good. Yeah, I think that looks fairly good. Okay, so this has wonkified the overall pattern. Ooh, I like that a little bit more. That's looking better. But I want to blur the pattern now, which I can do with the same nodes at different values. Okay, so duplicate these two, move them backwards in the chain. Well, actually, maybe forward in the chain. And maybe it doesn't really matter that much. But the mix node is going to go here, and then this into the vector. Now, the only difference is that the noise scale value is going to be cranked way up. So we're talking like 10,000. All right, so now when we zoom in, that has essentially blurred the texture. But we don't want it to be that blurred. So how about 0.1? Yeah, something like that. All right, so the next element in the in this shader is going to be a voronoi secondary component. And what I want to do is, we'll use it here, but I want to add another mapping node. I'm going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to use these coordinates and then plug it into the next mapping node. Because with the voronoi pattern, what I want to do is scale it in X. All right, so it stretches this pattern out like this. Maybe invert the color, converter, color ramp, and then flip the flags, flip color ramp, increase the scale. Yeah, something like this. This kind of pattern will be mixed over top and create a pretty convincing effect, I think. Am I going too fast on the texture stuff? Is it hard to follow? I can go over stuff if it's too fast. From Miranda, wondering if it's possible, since 2.8 uses nodes as layers for texture painting, when the shader is done, can you save it as a texture to then use in Eevee? Yeah, you definitely could. What you would do is bake out the texture. So for example, like, you know, if I wanted to bake out this voronoi, I've got it going to the viewer node, and in the cycles bake menu, where is that, by the way? At the bottom, yeah, in cycles bake, if I bake out the emit value, that is going to be the pure texture information. So any textures that you plug into a viewer node using Node Wrangler or just a straight emission node, bake it out as emission and you'll have that raw texture as an image file. Now I want to mix these two components. I think it's just going to be a straight mix value. Maybe at 0.5 should be fine. So now if we zoom in, we're starting to get more of that pattern that we see in the patch reference. Although right now my pattern is like perfectly straight up and down grid format. So if with this mapping node, the first mapping node, I can rotate in, let's say, I think Z is the value. Let's go like 30 degrees. Yeah, so now I rotate the whole pattern, which also mimics the reference. Okay, so the orientation of the stitches does change. I mean, that looks a little bit more realistic. All right, so now we're ready to plug this into a normal socket. So converter, not color ramp, vector bump. Plug that into the height. I know the strength at 1 is almost always too strong, so a normal value, let's plug it in the normal socket, and it's going to be the same sort of color, the same sort of shader properties. So choose a color, like a nice CG cookie orange, and then metallic up to 0.5. Threads do just have this sort of metallic quality about them. That looks pretty good. Anisotropy, we'll turn that all the way up. There we go. Yeah, it's looking pretty decent already. Roughness, let's take it down to like 0.2. There we go. Awesome. Yeah, we're getting pretty close. I like the way this is turning out. Okay, now the threads look pretty good, but if we zoom into our reference, I really want to have these black parts, like little black spaces, present. Right now the color is just a little too uniform. So I'm going to also plug in the value of this mixture into our color, have it affect our color. So Shift A, add a color mix RGB node. This will go in slot 2. Then we'll drag our orange color to slot 1 and have it be a multiply. There we go. Now this will go into the color. There we go. A little bit more detail into that patch. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I think it's looking like threads. Question, can you also make a normal map from shaders? Well, yes, because yes, you should be able to with if you change the bake type to be normal, it should incorporate any normal value that's part of that particular material on the object. So yeah, I think you should be able to bake these normals, these procedural normals, as an image texture that way. Excellent. Now the last element I want to add is an input ambient occlusion node. So if we plug that in, we don't really see much effect. Maybe if I change the distance up to 10, still not much effect. There's not a whole lot of room for ambient occlusion, but what I want to do is add a converter color ramp, and then if I really crank up the black value, we'll start to see some ambient occlusion creep in. All right, if I zoom in, it's just on the edges. So I think that this works well as just a darkening of the patch where the threads are attached. It gives it a little bit of age. It's not like perfectly new. And so, I mean, if I crank this up just a little bit more, it's pretty subtle, but I like it. I like adding it. So we will also make that a color mix RGB, not light fall off. I'll just duplicate this multiply node, and we will multiply it over top. All right, so now we've got a little bit of darkening around the edges. I think that looks nice. Cool. Maybe the strength at 0.5 is a little strong. How about 0.8? 3. There we go. Yeah, I think that looks good. Nice. All right, so the only thing left to do, let me take another look at the pattern, actually. So yeah, you can see that it does, I mean, the closer we get, it doesn't look exactly like the reference, but I think it's close enough. We can maybe make it favor the brick texture a bit more. If I go to like 0.3, going lower will make it favor the brick texture. Maybe the blur is a little too strong, 0.05. So yeah, we've got options here to finesse this material, but overall, I think it looks fairly good. Question, don't you have to enable AO from the world settings to get the, you do for Eevee, but not for cycles. So since I'm not using Eevee, which, well, I'll turn on Eevee in just a second, but since I'm not using Eevee, I don't have to turn that on in cycles. Speaking of Eevee, if I switch to look dev, let the shader kind of load. The main reason I'm not using Eevee for this project is the bump node does not look great, right? Like it's bump nodes just act a little weird in, let me maximize this. By the way, how fast is Eevee on this new computer? Wow, pretty cool. But like you can see how pixelated the texture gets, and that's just a limitation with Eevee. I'm not exactly sure how it could be solved or if it will, but the shader does work in Eevee. It's just it doesn't look quite as good. So anyway, that's why I've been using, oh, also Eevee does not support, where is it? It doesn't support anisotropic reflection yet. I mean, surely it will, but it doesn't yet. So that's kind of a deal breaker for this project. Let's go back to rendered view. Looks much better in cycles. All right, so now that I've got AO, I think this whole shader is done. I'm ready to apply it to our other patches in their various colors. So we'll add the white version. Go to our materials. Question, you should convert your bump to normal and you will be fine in Eevee. Right, so how do I, are you talking about like, is there a way to do that inside of Blender, like with a node? Or like, how would I convert that? Vector. Yeah, I don't know how I would do that programmatically. Or with nodes. But yeah, like if you convert your textures, your image textures to normal maps, it'll work fine. So yeah, if you know something I don't know about how to convert black and white procedural information into a normal map, I am all ears. Almost looks like you could make bamboo from that texture. Yeah, so what I think you're talking about is this does sort of look like a floor pattern, and like well, I've seen them in like Japanese movies, like the samurai, whenever they go inside, like Japanese interiors on the floor. Isn't that like bamboo flooring? Maybe I'm wrong. Using the oh, right. Miranda, you're talking about no. Oh yeah, so using the normal mat cap, that is an option. It seems a little bit more involved than what I want to do for this project. Again, cycles is not outdated, so it's working fine. If you really wanted to do it in Eevee, then you certainly could. All right, so I'm adding the other face patch materials. So clicking the eyes, that's going to be white. I'll choose thread face orange, duplicate it, call it white. Oops. Okay, I guess we're going with, no, that's right. I'm sorry. That's correct. Now I need to switch the color, just desaturate it. Make sure the value is 0.9 or 0.8. That's fine. This looks pretty good. All right, now what I do like to do with the other face patches, let's see if it's present in my other reference. Yeah, so you can see here that the orientation switches slightly. Whereas like on the bottom, it's sort of diagonal, slightly up left. And then the blue is a different pattern and it's angled. I think it looks like either straight up or slightly up to the right. So anyway, the patches, the various patch colors do change in orientation. So I'm going to do that with the Z axis in the mapping node. We can change that. Hold on, let me take a drink. We can change that to let's say like a 60 degrees, maybe negative 15. There we go. Looks pretty good. And then the same thing for the black. Let's choose face orange, duplicate it, black. And this will be a black color. Almost black, not completely black. Maybe need to make the thread border a little bit darker as well. There we go. Okay, so that is pretty much the entire patch construction and adding materials. So do I have time? What time is it? 3:16. Yeah, I think I have time to go over conforming that to another object. Yeah, I'm going to save this file and then save it as a new version. Okay, so what I did for the, if we switch back over to the presentation, so for this main render, I just kind of added a cloth kind of denim, very simple cloth simulation to add a couple wrinkles and make it non-flat. So I'm going to import, no, maybe I won't. I'm going to actually just add it to like a sphere then, because that's going to be good enough. It'll get the point across. The chat delay is really long here. Yeah. Oh, so we've got... hopefully the Ethernet cable will help diminish that delay. That's kind of my last effort to fix that. I wonder, I mean, I assume Gonzo was doing that. I should ask him. Let me add an image, or look at this reference. So a noise texture to bump to normal. Right, so that's exactly what I'm doing. It's just using the black and white noise texture into a bump map, but it's not converting that to a normal data. That's exactly how I've got the scene set up right now. This is black and white information plugged into that same bump map into the normal channel. And in Eevee, it still doesn't look great. Like with normal, with black and, yeah, you just have to convert it to that purpley type data. All right, so we're going to work on conforming this to a sphere then. All right, let's go back to the 3D view. And I need to remember how I did this. Yeah, I think I remember. So we're going to start by adding our object to conform to. This could be a person's back or, well, I mean, maybe I should just go ahead and do that. Let's import an obj of CG library models bipeds man C. This will work fine. All right, so we're going to rotate 180. We're going to basically put this patch, like it's a massive patch on this guy's back. All right, just to show you how to make it conform. I'm going to switch to a matte cap. I prefer that. Okay, excellent. All right. So what I'm going to do is use the what's it called? I forgot the name of the modifier already. It is called mesh deform. All right, we're going to use one mesh to conform all of the objects in the patch to the back of this character. Oh, that's interesting. YouTube is a second faster than CG Cookie. Oh, our cookie is missing eyebrows. That's right. Thank you. We can do that pretty quickly. Oh, and this thing is facing the wrong direction. All right, so the way we can add the eyebrows, let's turn on our reference. We're just going to use a version of this curve. Wow. I'm going to duplicate it. I am going to move it to its own object because it will be a unique material. And I'm going to convert this to a Bezier curve. Also set the handle type to be aligned. All right. Alt-O to disengage proportional editing. Okay, now for this I am going to use the classic Bezier format for building this. All right. So you can, with curves, you can control the diameter, which I think is it Control A? Nope, Alt S. It's Alt S. All right. So if I Alt S to 0, we have a perfect point on the end. If I subdivide in between these two, subdivide, and then Alt S, that can start to create a thicker version. And I might need to Alt S, or I mean subdivide again. Alt S. Alt S. This is a pretty extreme shape, but we're getting there. Need to subdivide again, and then Alt S all the way down to 0. All right, it's not perfectly aligned with the artwork underneath it, but it's pretty close. All right, there we go. I do need to switch the direction. Nice. So this will be its own thread material. Let's apply the existing one. Thread A, and then duplicate thread border B. Whoops. Thread border orange. Uh-oh, I've been linked to something. Let me check it out. Yeah, 11. Well, that's not right. No, it's only one. I've been gradually burning all of my physical movie collection into a Plex media server. So I've burned all my movies, and now I'm on to the TV shows. And we have all the Friends seasons, but we do not have season 11. So I don't know what that is about. It's a good catch. That's funny. All right, so I'm going to adjust the orange material for this eyebrow. Switch over to the shader menu, shader editor, and all it is just adjusting the color. All right, so I do want it to stand out differently than the other orange. That looks pretty good. Nice. All right, so let me then create the other one real quick. I'm just going to select a couple points, maybe do these 3 points. Shift E to duplicate. That way I have a good start. Control or Alt S. Alt S. Alt S. E to extrude. Alt S 0. There we go. That's pretty close. It's a little bit of an artifact there, but I don't think that's going to matter. I think it's going to work fine when it's rendered. Yeah, check that out. Looks like stitching. Excellent. Control S, let's save this new file. See you later, Keith. Thanks for hopping on and joining us. Okay, then keep your secrets. Nah, I think Friends needed to stop when it stopped, so Friends season 11 hopefully will, I assume, never exist. All right, so back to the conforming issue, or the conforming task. Projecting all of these objects to conform to the shape of the character's back. So I'm going to create a shape now. I guess we can create it off of this mesh here. I'm going to duplicate this mesh, and let me make sure that I move it to the scene collection. And this is going to be called the cage. All right, this is going to be the deforming cage that will take all of these objects into being conformed to the back. All right, go to wireframe, and I'm going to scale and edit mode. Delete everything except the outer verts. All right, and then we can fill these, add a couple vertices. All right, so now we've got this object that's encompassing our entire patch. Can I then use the grid fill? How many verts do we have? 22 verts. So I should be, since it's an even number, I should be able to do hit the spacebar grid fill. I can pause rendering, by the way. What was I doing here? Grid fill. Okay, that should be fine. And then I need a little bit more geometry than this, I think. So can I subdivide? Or just add a subdivision surface modifier, perhaps? Apply. Yeah, okay, this is going to be fine. All right, then what I'm going to do is project this object to the back of our character. All right, so let me turn off all the patch stuff. Patch faces, patch borders. There we go. We can turn off ref. All right, so I'm gonna go to the object data for this cage object and add a shape key. Turn it up to 1, and then I will simply project this object. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to simply project it with a vertex snapping. Yeah, take it back. I'm going to instead use, because it's going to be a cleaner conformation, to use shrink wrap. All right, so I'm going to add a shrink wrap modifier instead. And since I can apply this modifier as a shape key, it'll be good. So I'm going to select this object. You see how it conforms very nicely. Let's use project. And make sure that can I keep it above the surface? Above surface. That's fine. That'll be good. So I can apply this as a shape. I'm sorry, as a shape key. There we go. Now you can see that happening. Very nice. I will edit the shape key a little bit so that it's not penetrating. There we go, like that. Maybe that won't matter. Maybe that won't matter. I'm going to undo that. Remove the threads face orange material since it doesn't matter either. And the only thing left to do, I think, is add a solidify modifier. All right, and the reason I'm using a solidify modifier is I want it to encompass the thickness of the patch. All right, so with that enabled now, let's take the shrink wrap back down to turn off the shrink wrap shape key. All right, so with the patch stuff, turn that stuff back on. And I just need to adjust the solidify offset so that I encompass the entire patch geometry. There we go. Okay, so now I should be able to select my patch stuff. Let me start with the border here. Add a modifier, mesh deform. Choose the object cage, and then bind it. All right, and now when let's see, I'm going to set this up with a little bit of animation just to make it easier on me. Switch this bottom to the timeline, and then on frame 1, let's add a key. The shrink wrap, enable it, add a key at 0, insert keyframe, go to frame 2, change to 1, insert keyframe. All right, so now when I hit left and right on my keyboard, left and right arrow, it will go from on to off. Also, it means that I can hide the cage. We can see the deformation happen just like that. All right, so now we're conforming it to the back. Now it's just a matter of copying or adding a mesh deform object, selecting the cage, binding it. There we go. Only thing is, when I select the cage object, it seems that, yeah, I need to go to like 0.96. So that way we don't get any penetration. Oh, look at it's turning black because of the ambient occlusion. That's kind of that's a funny side effect. All right, so I've adjusted the shrink wrap. Instead of a level of 1 where it was penetrating, now I can just dial it back slightly. And yeah, that looks pretty good. I just need to copy the modifiers, I think, from this object. Yeah. I'm going to copy the modifier from this one to this one. I just don't want to go one by one. So how about I select all the border objects. There we go. And Control L, link the modifiers. All right, now I need to go one by one and bind them. Nice, so it's conforming pretty well. Then the same thing, Control L, link the modifiers from that first patch face to the others. Unbind, bind. Wait, I think I need to bind. Yeah, I need to bind whenever it's close. So frame 1, unbind, bind, unbind, bind. All right. I think the whole patch is now conformed to the back. I might need to turn that ambient occlusion element off. Shader editor. Yeah, if we just turn this off, which I am using. I know I said at the beginning that the new version of 2.8 kind of mutes it darkens the whole node, but I didn't download the brand new version. So maybe turn that off for these materials. There we go. Now it's a conformed patch. There we go. So that is probably all and more that you ever need to know about creating patches in Blender. Make sure I didn't miss any questions. Kent, I learned a solid 3 new things that you've never seen before. That is a huge victory. Awesome. It makes it worth it. Glad to hear it. Any questions that I'm missing? I suppose we are ready now for the trivia. Get you guys some points. So Jan Willem, I wonder if he could not have just made it one mesh. I could have converted the curves to geometry. I definitely could have done that. That would have been a solid approach. The way it is now, I guess I could still go to frame 1 and kind of work non-destructively. I could still adjust the curves if I wanted to, and then could just jump to frame 2 and have it reconform. So it's an effort to be a little more non-destructive, I suppose. Let's see. Awesome. All right. Well, that's going to be it for the demo. Now we can finish up the stream with, where is it? The trivia. Awesome. Let us do it. Now, you guys know the rules. No Googling. You must submit each question, which Googling is not going to help you here, but you must submit your answer during the 10-second countdown. After I ask the question, I'll count to 10. Submit your question. Do your best not to look at the chat, because you might see a majority or whatever, and be able to crowdsource an answer if you don't know. So try not to look at that. Keep track of the total right answers on your own. If you get all 5 correct, then you win. Must be an honest situation. This is an honor system. All right. So the theme of this quiz is the new computer, and if you remember the specs of the new computer. So let's go. Oh yeah, and you get 50 XP. Always forget that little part. If you get all 5 correct, so 10 apiece. What operating system am I running on the new PC? I'll count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I really need to get a little jingle, some sort of music to play during this. I assume Jeopardy's theme is copyrighted. I will wait because I know there's a delay. All right, we had several C's. We had a D. Yeah, we started out early, or started out easy. It is Pop OS, pretty obvious, as Aaron said. Which I mean, is it? I was looking. I don't think there's any evidence of that on the screen right now, but yeah, pretty easy if you were paying attention. Next, number 2. Which is my new CPU? Is it an AMD EPYC 7551 32 core, AMD Ryzen Threadripper 2950, Intel Xeon CPU E52697 version 2, Intel Xeon CPU E54669 version 4. I'll count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perhaps this is my easiest quiz to date. Not for Aaron, though. You're using the chat, Miranda, and you owned that you were using it. I mean, I don't know. I can't, like, not give you the points, I guess. Pavel. All right, I think that's everyone's answers are in. Now I want a new computer. The answer is B. I've got an AMD Ryzen Threadripper 2950. So the B's got it. Let's go to the next one. What about my new graphics card? Is it a GeForce RTX 270 with Max Q design? Is it a Titan V, a GeForce RTX 2080, or a Titan RTX? By the way, the naming conventions in hardware is kind of ridiculous. It was really difficult to navigate that when I was trying to find new components. But I mean, look at this. It's like a run-on sentence. Anyway, I'll count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I see the C's rolling in. I see an A. Take a sip of my tea. So the answer is C. It's a GeForce RTX 2080. And so far, it's done brilliantly with Blender, so I do recommend it. It's a good one, I mean, so far. And the reason I went for it was, if you go to Blender Benchmark, the fastest GPU, GeForce RTX 2080. So that's why I decided on this one, and that it was within the budget. But I think this is a brilliant thing to have for people. But the problem is, like, I mean, there's tons of GPUs, but when you view the benchmark, it only shows the top 5. Like, I would love for it to show more than that. But anyway, number 4. How much RAM do I have in this system? 16 gigabyte? Oh, 16 gigabyte. I think that's a funnier way to say it. Since I say gigabytes a lot, I'm trying to make that more entertaining to me. 24 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes. I will count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. More tea. This one's a little bit more widespread. We have several D's, or, well, a couple D's, a couple C's. All right, looks like the answers are in. And the answer is C, 32 gigabytes. That is what I've got. What kind of tea? So I don't know what name it is, but my wife makes it, and we call it tea, even though I don't think there's technically any source element that could be classified as tea. So it's water, honey, lemon essential oil, I think thieves essential oil, and honey. And apple cider vinegar, if you saw her or heard her from the other room. Anyway, I drink it when I'm like feeling sick, so it's delicious. All right. Okay, last question. How fast did the new GPU render the hour-long kitchen scene? I mentioned this at the beginning. In my initial test of the hardware, a scene that took an hour to render on my Mac Pro 2013, which only had CPU render capability. The GPU did not work with cycles. It took an hour to render. how fast did it render in my new with my new GPU? Was it 5 minutes? Was it 10 minutes? Was it 15 minutes? Was it 20 minutes? I will count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I see a couple of people asking or guessing C with a question mark because I did try and throw you off. I think I had 3 C's in a row just to confuse you. But yes, the answer is C, 15 minutes. That's pretty cool. An hour-long scene in 15 minutes. The future is bright. So awesome. Well, yeah, so I've got your answers in the chat. I will, based on the amount of answers, I don't think it's going to be, I'll collect all of your right answers, however many you got. And if you could actually, yeah, if you can say how many you got right, if you got 3 out of 5, if you got 4 out of 5, just say that in the chat. That way I have that record and I will add those XP points manually within the next day or so. So yeah, that's it. Did anyone get all 5? I feel like there were some all 5ers. Pavel, 5 out of 5. That's okay, Wilco. If for some reason the chat was being buggy and was not reacting in an appropriate amount of time, just go ahead. I honor system. We're all pretty honest, I think. Just tell me how many you got right, and I will trust you. Another 5 out of 5, Miranda. Good job. But 1 you did get from the chat, so I will decide, I guess, if I should give you only 45 points instead of 50. I appreciate the honesty, though. Awesome, guys. Well, I'm going to let you go. Yeah, be sure to tell me how many you got right. But otherwise, I will see you next week. We're starting at least 2 streams about facial anatomy. That should be fun. I think it'll definitely be a group effort, I will say. We're going to work together on the facial anatomy. So I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your Tuesday. Goodbye.